just tell us a little bit about your background. I understand you were county commissioner here in Allegheny County. When was that? When were you?
I entered politics back in the late '80s after I left the military. I was an officer in the United States Army Military Intelligence, and came back to my hometown of Brentwood, which is a small suburb of Pittsburgh. Ran for the town council, was elected councilman. Later became the chairman of the Republican Party of Allegheny County, and then in 1995 went on to run for county commissioner. Was part of a big upset victory here. The first time there was a Republican majority on the commission since 1932. So it was a real watershed event. And then went on to serve 4 years as a county commissioner. Worked with the mayor of Pittsburgh, Tom Murphy, and my fellow commissioner, Mike DeWita. We built the 2 stadiums. We put together the plan and the financing to do Heinz Field and PNC Park, as well as the new convention center, and a whole number of other, I think, historic things, including ushering in the new form of government in the county, which is now a county executive with a 15-member council. So I was fortunate to be part of some pretty historic, locally historic events in western Pennsylvania. So that's my background. Okay.
Now, to come out with a story that the general public would consider to be paranormal, unbelievable, like the movie The Exorcist, I mean, to me, that says a lot about your integrity and based on your position. I mean, you do consulting now, and you're a very believable person, obviously. So to come out with this, it has to be true, because you wouldn't do it because it's not enhancing, let's say, your work life compared to this.
Your
professional career.
Sure.
Yeah.
What
do you consult? What do you consult? I mean, what kind of work do you do now?
I do, well, being a former politician, as your career path moves on, I do political consulting for the for entities looking to interact with the state government, with the federal government, with the local government, and that's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it makes it that much believable when somebody who has really nothing to gain from telling this story comes out and says it, you know? And, you know, I've had people say that too. Well, you're the head of security for UPS. You're investigating UFOs? I mean, some people would roll their eyes. I say, you know what? There's a lot of evidence, though. So well, let's get started. Tell us basically when did you buy this house and when did this activity start? And tell us the story.
Sure. Well, I'd like to just continue on and close out what we were just discussing about my motivation for writing this book, and you know, the idea of, well, people have this conception, if you write a book and it gets published, you make a lot of money. Well, that's rarely the case.
I agree with you.
Even with a bestseller.
Yeah.
There's a reason why successful authors put a book out every few months, because an individual book doesn't make a lot of money. I can tell you that this book, to get it published, and I have a publisher, Penguin Random House. I didn't self-publish this, but to get to that process and the hoops that I had to jump through and the consultants that I needed to work with has cost me a lot more money than I've made. I hope to recoup that money at some point, but from a financial standpoint, I didn't do it to get rich. So just set that aside.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, because I've published 6 books. I've been in 7 TV series. There is no money in the UFO field at all.
I really was driven to write this book. First of all, I mean, the story is just bizarre. My wife and I had no interest in the paranormal, had no experience with the paranormal, and certainly if I was going to write a book, this would be the last subject I ever thought I would write a book about. So again, to lay that out on the table. But once we got wrapped up in it, And we were in the middle of what became a battle, not only for our home, but to an extent for our sanity, for our lives to an extent. It was just crazy. And and I'll get to the story itself, but I mean, we were working with the Bishop of the Diocese of Pittsburgh, with a number of priests that were assigned to help us. The mayor of Pittsburgh, Tom Murphy, is the person who went to the bishop on my behalf to begin with. He made the recommendation that I keep a record of what took place. So I began to keep a diary. When it was finally over, several years later, in 2006, and I had 375 pages of notes, Tom once again said, "You got to write a book," which was not an easy thing to do, to take this narrative of this bizarre situation and turn it into something that was readable. But why I did it is because it's all true. Mm-hmm. And I know that a lot of UFO enthusiasts are watching this show. That's what this show is, I'm sure, about UFOs and the unexplained, what goes on in the heavens, so to speak. But I can tell you that after having first-person, primary source information of dealing with the demonic, with the supernatural, I came out the other end of the rabbit hole realizing this is all true, that God exists, that God has angels, that there is a counter act to God called Lucifer. The devil is for real. The devil has demons and minions, and there's this whole unseen dimension world around us, similar to the movie The Matrix, where good and evil they're doing their thing, and we're in the middle of it all. It's absolutely true, and we experienced it. We were part of it. So I had somewhat of a kind of a religious zeal to tell people, hey folks, I'm telling you, this is true. That God exists and the devil exists. And when we see kind of unbridled evil bursting forth in different ways in the world, in our country, in San Bernardino, it's the devil using people for its own purposes.
Did you have this same opinion prior to this happening, let's say in the 1970s and 80s, regarding God? Did you have this same type of opinion, regarding being so, that God is real? Did you believe that then? Or
that's a great question from the standpoint of what is faith. Now, certainly, my wife and I, we were evangelical Christians. We went to kind of a mega church, read our Bibles, believed in God, had Christian faith. But what is faith? Faith is believing in kind of what you believe to be true, and you have faith that it's true. You're kind of sure that it's true. But I can tell you now, my faith isn't faith anymore. I have the faith of one of the disciples or apostles of Jesus, who saw Jesus walk on the water, who saw Jesus raise someone from the dead, who saw Jesus feed the 5,000. Their faith wasn't faith in, I think it happened. They know it happened. That's what I have now. I mean, in dealing with the supernatural for over 2 years, on almost a daily, and I say daily, it would go in spurts, but I mean, like living with the invisible man in your house, and what we went through, and how this thing behaved, and what it did to us. It all happened. It's all true.
And you see, people will say, why does this happen? Why does God allow it to happen? That's the point, Fred, is that life is a total test. And when this type of thing happens, you either collapse and get absorbed by the dark side because it's broken you down and they take you, or you get to the point where you now 100% go. So allowing the evil allows you to develop and become religious, a believer.
Yeah, well, I will say too that, going into it, we certainly had a faith that I believe what the Bible says is true. So I believed that I didn't think it was going to take as long as it did or be as difficult as it was. The Bible says resist the devil and it will flee from you. Or, he that is in us is greater than he, the devil, who's in the world.
Absolutely.
So I had that faith that this thing was evil, but that ultimately evil would be overcome by good. But I thought it would be a lot simpler. Get out of here, devil leaves. That wasn't the case, because we were dealing with an entity, as I've learned and understood about the hierarchy of evil. This thing wasn't going to leave that easy. And it became a protracted battle. I thought that the priests, when we finally engaged the Catholic Church, would be kind of like, having an exterminator in to take care of a bedbug problem or something. And they would come in with the hats and the incense and do their thing and maybe do it twice and the place would be cleansed. Well, it made it worse. This thing pushed back. It fought. And that faith was tested, but I can say, and as I had mentioned prior to the show, that we would speak to it. I certainly didn't speak to it out of any courage or bravado that I had personally. I mean, I'm an ant. I'm nothing when it comes to dealing with one of these supernatural beings, but with the power and the backing, the name of Jesus Christ. I had that power to protect me, to protect us as this battle was engaged. Not that it didn't get its licks in, but as time went on, we learned how to make its existence in our house kind of as miserable as it was making ours. And I was determined that in the end, that good and God would prevail, as happened.
I've had my own experiences, and I would say most of what I've learned in the last year, you're not taught in Catholic school. They don't tell you about a lot of this. So I was a lapsed Catholic from the point I got divorced in 1994, really until last June, where even though I've had this activity happen, when it ramped up last year and what just happened around Thanksgiving, I'm about where you are right now. And you've seen the change in me, and others that know me, is that what happened to you? You were this UFO guy. When did you become this religious person, this believer? I always was a believer in Jesus. I really was. But like most people, it's casual belief. And I think I didn't understand a lot of what was in the Bible and just the power that we have in the name of Jesus. And I did something last month, and I repelled it. And what happened to me is nowhere as bad as you, but I'm telling you, this is real. This is absolutely real.
Well, the message of the book, it's kind of funny. You would think that religious types, church types, would be all over this book because it verifies and tells a story about what religion is all about, good and evil. But because I wrote it as it happened and as I understood what was taking place, it doesn't always line up with the doctrine of different denominations. I've written things, as I said in my book, that Protestant evangelicals get worked up about, and also things that some Catholics have gotten worked. You would think the Catholic Church would be all over this book because of the credibility I give the authority of the Catholic Church in dealing with evil, but they're not. I think I was asked to come to 2 Catholic gatherings to talk, and I'm not insulted by that. I will say the folks that have the greatest interest seem to be people that aren't affiliated with religions or with having deep faith in the Bible. They're saying, wow, this guy says this is all true, that God is real. Maybe I need to take a second look at this. And one young girl, excuse me, but I want to finish with this. One young woman, when I was doing a book signing at a Barnes & Noble, came up to me and said, you know, the message of your book, to me, wasn't the paranormal or the scary part of it, it was your faith. And it has caused me to take a second look at what I believe and don't believe, because I have no faith in anything except maybe science. And now I need to reevaluate it.
You answered my question.
Okay.
Well, there's a couple of points here. One is, if you look at society, science has become the answer for everything. And science is atheistic, right?
Yeah.
They have to be able to explain it.
I'd like to know, and I hear that, I just thought this yesterday, I was listening to NPR, and when was the theory of dropped from evolution? It's never been proven.
It's a theory.
I'm not here to bash or get involved, but science has become a vehicle. It has become a religion to an extent for people who can't bring themselves to believe in God for whatever reason. I believe that every human is created with a hole in them that needs to believe in something greater than us. It was designed for God, to worship God, but a lot of folks can't do that. So they stuff science in there. And when you question things like evolution rationally, when you talk about the design of the human eye and how complicated it is and how it can change focus from night to day, and you say, how was that designed? Who designed it? People, they'll get insulted because it's like when somebody questions my belief in God, I feel threatened, as they do, because science has become their religion. And I think it's at the core of the whole global warming thing. And we don't need to get into politics, but I'm making a point that science has become a religion to people. Yeah,
and people put all their faith in science. You know, and I've said, if we were created from this primordial soup with a lightning bolt, then reenact that in a lab. They have never been able to create life. And there are so many holes in the theory of evolution. Even Darwin himself years later said, well, it doesn't quite add up. And I've done that in my books too. I've shot holes in evolution where it doesn't add up. Radiometric dating doesn't add up. You know, there's so much about it. But,
well, Huxley, I believe it was Huxley who was the big apologist for Darwin, at some point stated that really, when you get down to it, evolution deals with the existence of guilt that people have. Whether they believe in God or not, they still feel guilty about being bad. And when you come up with a theory that eliminates the reason for guilt, hey, you've delivered a great service to people. Now they can go out and be as immoral as they want and get up the next day and feel great.
There's no ramifications for it. You know, there's nothing you have to worry about.
Well, that's not what we can. I'm not here to preach.
But you know, the other thing too is I think, like if you look at the current Pope, and he just became very politically correct, right? With the things he says about global warming, other things, right? So what is the church doing? The biggest mistake they're doing, like with Vatican II, is you know, you no longer say the St. Michael prayer at the end of Mass. That's a powerful prayer to ward off the devil.
I say it.
Yeah.
I said it this morning, matter of fact.
Yeah. We no longer, you know, when I bring this topic up, even with UFO people, I have learned not to say angels and demons. I say malevolent, interdimensional entities. And then people say, oh, okay. If you say angels and demons, it's like a huge
Many
taboo.
people don't understand what malevolent and benevolent, they may understand benevolent,
Yeah.
but when you say malevolent, they don't understand what that means.
But don't you think a lot of that's going with the way they were brought up?
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
you and I have discussed this many times, okay, and I agree with you 100%. You used to have the little aliens running around with the hoods on their head and everything else. They were demonic as hell. But I think people are brought up in a way where, you know, you look at the UFO, even ghosts, okay? They were taught that these things don't exist. And they don't want to believe it until it hits them. And then once it hits them, their whole attitude changes.
Yeah.
You know, ghosts, I mean, I think it's a foregone
ghost is
conclusion
demons.
that,
Yeah.
no, that ghosts, that spirits of people who once lived for whatever reason, usually associated with some, you know, tragedy involving their death, are tied to certain places for periods of time. I mean, all you have to do is go to Gettysburg with your camera phone at night and take 4 or 5 pictures, and you're going to get a bright orb in total pitch black, and it'll be right in front of you. But when you go past that and you start talking about then the demonic and angelic beings,
And they're different from
that's
ghosts.
a different situation.
Absolutely.
There are lots of haunted houses. There are lots of houses, and ghosts aren't particularly mean. I guess there can be some, but for whatever reason, they're reenacting something that had to do with their life or their death. Maybe it's purgatory, the Catholic doctrine of purgatory, and they have to atone for something and stay tied to a place for a period of time. But when you're talking about the demonic, demons, whole different situation.
And here's an example, Fred, with ghosts.
I think that people don't look at it until it affects them. This is what I'm saying. Like you're saying now. I understand what you're saying. Like you go and you get an orb. They affiliate the ghosts with the demons. All of that is
Because
taken
of
into
TV
one.
and movies,
Yeah.
they don't give you the distinction.
Right, and I think this is it. This is why people think that way.
Well, let me just tell you what ghosts are, and this is stuff I've learned really over the last year. A ghost is a human spirit. It cannot move things. What you see on television stuff, ghosts don't have that power. They can stay here. You cannot exorcise a ghost. Did you know that? If you brought the priest in for a ghost to exorcise it, no, they're not demonic.
You can pray for them, and eventually there is some type
Try
of
to convince them to go to the light.
Yeah, I believe it has something to do, and again, it's all conjecture. All religious doctrine is conjecture. Nobody really knows, but there is the doctrine of purgatory. And for whatever reason, they can't move on or won't, and the Catholic Church has prayers for the dead that encourage people, pray, move on to your eternal destination, whatever that might be or how it works.
Yeah.
The Bible says, though, that when the devil was cast out of heaven by Michael the Archangel, and his minions, 1/3 of the angels went with the devil. And they were not sent into hell. They were sent to the earth. And that they're here. This is the abode of the devils. The earth is say, why bad things happen in the world? Because of the devil.
Yeah.
And a lot more things could happen or would happen if there wasn't the restraint of angelic beings that are also here, affiliated with Christians or with those people of faith to protect us. And again, as I pointed out earlier, there's this whole world, this dimension around us where these things exist. They break through into the physical world in different manners. And I personally, and I'm not here to offend your UFO enthusiasts, I believe that the whole genre of UFOs is demonic.
And people have said that. Michael Heiser, there's a number of books written, and I've read a lot of those books recently. I'll disagree on that point because I firmly believe there's life on other planets, that God put it there, and that I think they have the same issues with demonic, and I believe the gray, and we'll talk about this later, is demonic. I don't think he's an ET. what he does falls right in line with demonic activity. And so I do, and I think they have the same issues, the ETs, with the demonic realm that we have, which makes them more similar to us. You know,
the good and the bad.
As I said, everybody has their own beliefs and has a right to those. I will say though, you know, my experience, you know, wasn't, you know, one night in my backyard I looked up and I saw this, and I talk about it for 20 years. This is something that took place on a daily basis, day in, day out, for over almost 2.5 years. I have countless, you know, interactions with the supernatural, which I did my best to document in the book, The Demon of Brownsville Road. It's a quick read, I understand, and I make my case.
Yeah, you know, people like I remember just a few years ago saying, well, what is an archangel? Like, there's angels, there's archangels. Oh, I went to Catholics, you know, not Catholic school, but I would go every Wednesday from my public school and get so much I didn't, catechism, that I wasn't taught. There are 9 levels in heaven. We're actually level 10, we're the lowest. Then you get angels, right? Then you get archangels. Then you got all these others, you know, and then the number 1 below God is the seraphim. Okay? I don't know how many there are, but they are the number, you know, that's like Spock. That's the number 2 guy. That's what Lucifer was. Lucifer was the angel of light. He was God's most perfect creation, most beautiful, powerful angel, and he rebelled. So the thing I never understood is that when he took that 1/3 of the angels, he took 1/3 of the 9 different levels.
And that same hierarchy still exists within the demonic.
And that's why you get more powerful entities. Like, you can repel a low-level minion that was an angel
with holy water or something like that.
But then they come back stronger. And that's what I just recently had. What came back at Thanksgiving was stronger than what I repelled last June with the help of Rhonda that was on our show. And then that's the scary part, though, is once you're marked, they don't forget. They come back. They actually can communicate among themselves, and they go, you know, let's go up a level now from supervisor to manager. We need your help. And a more powerful one comes because they still try to get you.
Oh, I'm aware of that. You know, as we were dealing with this struggle within the house, it would do its best to demonstrate how what we were doing to confront it wasn't phasing it, and how powerful it was. And it would come back with something even more dramatic. Now, ultimately, it was vanquished. It was moved and left the house. But certainly, you know, I pray, in fact, I pray a series of prayers every day, in the morning, at night, the same prayers that a Catholic exorcist prays for protection. To protect me, to protect my family. It's like writing a book about the mob, except a lot worse. Evil's not happy to be unmasked. The devil wants you to think that it doesn't exist, that evil is just the evil intentions of people, that there isn't this demonic force. But they know, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm always on guard. I mean, since I brought this book out, I can tell you that I've been faced with personal attacks, not personal physical attacks, but what I feel demonic oppression on me. Last March, we lost one of our children in a terrible tragedy. I can't stand up and say the devil killed my son, but certainly there was some relation to what happened to our family, and I continue to pray for protection. And ultimately, if I pay a price for telling this story in some way, so be it. This story is going to continue, and hopefully the message continues when people read it that, hey folks, it's all real.
Yeah. Well, what you just said about, you know, the devil's greatest strength is for people not to believe. And that's why I brought up Vatican II. And you look at most of the faiths now, they don't practice exorcism. They don't mention the devil. And I think if you polled the people, 40% will say there's nothing like the devil doesn't exist. That was old Middle Ages thought process. So his greatest strength is our non-belief in him.
Well, in the story, once the proverbial stuff hit the fan in our house in 2003, we moved in the late 80s in 1989, and we, after a few weeks, simply came to the determination that we had bought a haunted house, whatever that meant. There was paranormal activity that happened on a regular basis, but it didn't seem to threaten us. And we thought, well, Casper the Friendly Ghost. Eventually the kids came to understand our house was haunted, but it didn't seem to be malevolent. But looking back on it, and I see how it was slowly setting us up. Again, at the time, not realizing what was behind the mental issues my children were having and so on, and my wife. When it hit, when it unmasked itself in 2003, and we have stuff flying through the air. I mean, it's like some crazy movie, like the Amityville Horror. Who are you going to call? Well, I can't call Dan Aykroyd and Bill.
Ghostbusters.
You know, the ghost. I wish I could have. Just look in the yellow pages. So what do you do? I talked. We were in counseling with our minister, a Protestant church, and I said, "Hey, Pastor, I'm telling you, there's crazy stuff going on in the house. There's a link. There's evil. I just feel evil in this house. Something." He said, "There's certainly a supernatural being there. I need help." You know what he did? Hey, I don't know.
It's surprising.
You know,
it really
and this is everyone brings their Bibles every week and raise their hands and clap and talk about, what's in the Bible. But when the rubber meets the road, Father Langwin, I need help.
Yep.
Catholic Church had the authority. We weren't crazy. We weren't nuts. They were very businesslike. And he said to me, in a year, we'll know if we're making progress. You have a decision to make. Sell the house, wish the people who buy it best, move on with your life, take the red pill, or if you take the blue pill, we'll stay with you. In a year, we'll know. And I said, what do you mean in a year? But I turned to I saw the movies, The Exorcist. I turned to the only organization that claimed to have the knowledge, the experience, and the ability to deal with the demonic.
Absolutely. Both of my kids have experienced this, and they both go to those churches that have the big screens and to play the music, and it's entertaining.
That's great, yeah,
and it's cool.
I know.
Alternate back and forth, and my
yeah.
kids will say to me, Dad, why do you go to Catholic? It's a ritual. You stand, you kneel, you stand, you sit, you kneel, you say things, and it's a ritual. And I say there's really three reasons why I stay Catholic. One is it goes back to the Son of God, even though all Christian does.
Right.
It goes back to the Son of God. Two, they practice confession. It's very, very important to confess your sins, to be in a state of grace. These demonic entities cannot see what you've confessed. They only see the sins that you haven't confessed. And the most important, number three, is they practice exorcism. None of these other faiths practice it anymore. If they do, it's absolutely minimal. A couple of pastors here and there do it.
Well,
let me ask you a question.
I'm sorry.
Before you moved into the house, did the people that lived there prior to that have any?
Well, that's a great
say?
point of contention. The Post-Gazette, back a few years ago, I don't know, it was a year ago, last fall, instead of doing a book review, I believe once they read the book and saw that it had a faith-based religious message to it, being the good liberals that they are, decided that they were going to pan it and put it on the front page and assigned a reporter to do everything he could to poke holes.
That's amazing. That's what happens.
What he ended up doing was basically just finding more facts and more details that backed up the story. But to answer your question, the people who sold us the house, and I do describe this in detail, knew there were issues with the house. To their credit, I believe they thought they had dealt with them because there were religious objects buried in the front yard. They had had mass in the house several times. And I believe they thought it had been dealt with. I gave the previous owners a fictitious name, so but I had to tell that as part of the story. They're deceased, but their children aren't. And their youngest son, who was, I don't know at the time, maybe he was in high school, has been verbal to saying that I made this all up. And how dare I say that his parents knew they were selling us something that had issues. And that was the Post-Gazette article. So, yes, the people who sold us the house knew. The people who sold the house to them, because I talked to them, knew as well. And then that goes back to the first owners who were deceased. But I hired a historical detective. We went all the way back to 1909. We researched the people who built the house, what they did. We found out that there are in fact 4 bodies buried in the front yard of the house.
There you go.
That were buried there back in the 1790s after they had been killed during an Indian raid, during one of the Northwest Indian War. So all that wraps up. I did my best to document the story, to research the story. There's even a case where there was a blood-like substance that was sprinkled throughout the house. I had it analyzed several times by different nationally recognized laboratory folks. So, folks on the internet, without reading the book or knowing me or hearing me make all these accusations, well, why didn't he have this stuff tested? I did have it tested. I've done everything I can to verify and to check every aspect of this story. I was a military intelligence officer, professional in gathering and understanding facts, and that's what I did.
Does Pennsylvania have a law in the books where you have to disclose if a house is haunted? Because I grew up in New York and New Jersey, and it's interesting. It's almost like a UFO thing. Well, if ghosts aren't real and demonic isn't real, then why does New York and New Jersey have a law on the book that says the seller has to disclose if they believe or have had haunted? But in Pennsylvania, may not have that law.
I believe the law does not exist in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I don't think it is in Pennsylvania.
It isn't?
No,
yeah, no,
but New Jersey and New York, you have to disclose that to the seller that you've had demonic or paranormal activity.
Yeah.
Well, if I ever sell the house, I don't think I'll have that issue. But I will say that the issue was dealt with.
Yeah. Do you know, I lived 3 miles from the Amityville Horror, and when that came out in the 70s, my fiance, who I married, we went over to that house and looked at everything. That was a creepy looking house.
I went out there.
I lived right over in that area.
That took place over a two-week time frame, and most of these stories, or even the movies, the people deal with it, they get scared, they run away, and that's the end of the story. What's different with us is that we stayed put. We live in the house today. My grandkids come and visit and sleep overnight, and there's no issue.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 types, Fred. Let me add this first. There's the type where you have a house where something happened in that house, and that's why it's demonic. Like if there was a cult that had been practicing rituals, that is tied to the house. Then you have situations like I believe I have. I had minimal stuff happen in New York. Then there was like an 18-year period, nothing happened. It started up when I moved to Oklahoma. Really ramped up in New Jersey. That was a hell house in New Jersey. That house was haunted when we got there. But then listen, Fred, then it came here, and there's 3-year periods between stuff happening. And when I talked to a priest, he said it's not the house, it's you. Yeah. It's attached to you. Yeah. Sometimes they're attached to a house.
I was just going to say that.
Sometimes they're attached to a person.
It's following you.
Yeah, mine is following me. Go ahead.
Yeah. What did you ever find out? What the reason that this happened in the house?
Well, I mean, to an extent, yes. We feel that this spirit, I mean, in the analysis, and we found a number of different things that took place over the years, but initially, you have 4 people, 3 little girls and their mother, who were viciously attacked and killed on the land where the house is built.
Okay.
And they're buried there.
That's the people in the front yard.
Yeah, and there have been people who have claimed that they saw the mother, have seen the mother standing in the front yard. Hopefully that's not the case anymore. We marked the grave, we blessed the grave, and hopefully she's moved on. But, and again, this goes back to my point about evil making people do really heinous things. Not that war isn't bad, that the American Indians were any more vicious than the people they were fighting, but when you have something happen like that, the Native Americans generally did not kill women and children. They would take them hostage, sell them back, or make the children part of the tribe. They killed the men. So during this particular time, this particular war, they were sending a message. They wanted to send a message of terror, saying, if you cross the Monongahela, if you cross the Ohio and come west, we're going to kill you and kill your family. And that was the nature of that war at the time. So we believe that the evil spirit that perpetrated that killing of those children and their mother, that caused these men to commit that crime, that spirit in some way attached itself to the land. And that it eventually would inhabit the house, our house that was built there in 1909. And that if you read the story and you find out further death that took place in the house, the deaths that took place in the house were all related to children.
Now, when you, let's say you went on vacation, did any activity ever happen when you were away from the house? Did they follow you, or was it always in the house where this activity took place?
Well, that's an interesting question. We would leave every weekend. For years, as the kids grew up, we had a cottage at Conneaut Lake, and that's where we would. Well, in fact, in the summertime, my wife would actually go there and stay with the kids for weeks on end. We did have, at some points in time, activity take place in the house there that I believe was directed back to our house. During the battle, so to speak, this is, again, a big, old, turn-of-the-century Victorian, 3-story, top floor, separate apartment for servants or in-laws. My daughter and her husband and baby lived there at that time, and it actually went after my grandson, who I believe was 2.5 years old. We moved them out of the house to a duplex several blocks from the house because I wanted to get my grandson out of the house. This thing was, getting worse. For a time, it followed them to the duplex that they were in. We had to have the duplex blessed. It only took place for a couple weeks and then it went away. But these things in some way can project themselves and follow. But in our case, unlike what you just referenced, it's attached to the house. It was attached to the house.
Now, the odd thing with me is I think with mine, it's a generational sin. I've analyzed myself. There's nothing I've done, stuff my father's done, and I think my grandparents were mafioso in New York. So I look at mine as a generational sin.
And the Bible talks about that, about the sins of the fathers being placed upon, to the 3rd and 4th generation. And
an interesting quote is that once they've done this in 3 generations, they feel, and maybe it's the rules, that they can stake claim on your family, and it's extremely hard to get rid of them. So I've told my kids, I will break the chain because I'm going to protect you 2 kids. I'm going to break the chain.
I have some priests you can talk to about that.
And I may need to because I'm at that, it was the low level. It ramped up. What happened last June, what just happened at Thanksgiving.
What happened at Thanksgiving?
And half of the things that have happened to me has happened at Thanksgiving. And my son says to me, Dad, Thanksgiving is when the three of us are together. I said, you're right, because when I got divorced, the kids always went to their mother for Christmas. They always came to me for Thanksgiving.
Well, the first one you
Half
had
the
all-
things happened at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, the first one you had was during the holiday season too.
Well, most of the,
Yeah.
of the more prominent stuff happened,
What happened
at
Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving. Well, this past Thanksgiving, and it's surreal, and you've had this stuff happen, is my kids were planning, my daughter lives in North Carolina, she's flying up. I absolutely thought she was staying in my house. She always has stayed with me. I didn't know she wasn't staying, right? Monday of Thanksgiving week, I keep those spare bedrooms down the hallway closed, the door.
Yeah.
I come upstairs, I look, her bedroom door is wide open, 100%. I've only had that happen one other time in the 18 years I've lived there, but the door was kind of ajar. I have a 108-pound Doberman, and I figured maybe he pushed it open. Door was 100% open. I took it, I closed it. The next day, I look, the door's 100% open. It's almost like they were telling me, we're waiting for your daughter to come. And you remember in 2010 what happened
Yeah,
to my
right.
daughter.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
She got, entities went into her. It was creepy. And so now the door opens twice, right? So then, you know, the scratching noise sounds, real loud scratching, right? I got up, it was in my dining room, I was in the den reading. I kept getting up and have a little dresser there, and I pull it forward looking. There's got to be like a big rat coming through the wall because it's so loud. What struck me was my dog walked right past it. Didn't hear it. But what happened last year, he heard the sounds. We both heard them. And he didn't hear it. So this is that telepathic projection that they put in your head. So then, you know, I go to bed. Well, then for the next couple of, my daughter doesn't stay. Thank God. Her guardian angel was protecting her. My daughter, Wednesday morning or right before Thursday, right before she flew in, says, Dad, I'm staying at Nolan's house. I'm not staying with you. And I was like a little offended. You're here 5 nights, you're not staying one? Her guardian angel was protecting her. So she stayed with her brother. So for a couple of nights in a row, as I went into my bedroom, all of a sudden something poked me, like a needle, a pin. And I was getting these pokings in my legs, saying, what the heck is that, you know? One night I laid down, it was probably Wednesday night, before Thanksgiving, I laid down, and something pokes me in my head. Wow. I thought it's like a fingernail, and I said, whoa, did I just get bit by something? I laid back down, it was twice as bad. I looked in the mirror, and there was no mark there, right? I lay down, and I hear the most unnatural creaking in the sound. I thought the corner of the room was like taking a soda can and crushing it. So I, you know, had been versed now in what to say. I commanded them in the name of Jesus to leave, right? So I didn't hear anything. I closed my eyes. So I opened my eyes. I noticed it's pitch black. There's a quarter moon out. There was light coming through the windows, pitch black. And I love sleeping in the dark. I never put a night light on. I look, I can't see down the hallway. I can't see the light coming in the windows. I said, wow, this is the darkest I've ever seen it in my bedroom. All of a sudden, it creaks again. The sound was so loud in the corner, you'd think the wood got crushed. I got scared at that point. I, again, commanded them in the name of Jesus Christ to leave. You have no choice. You have to leave. I command you to go back to where you came from. And if you don't obey, you will go to the pit of fire now instead of later. All of a sudden, I see light. It catches my eye. I see a black veil lifting.
From the room.
From the room. And I see the light come through the window. Then I see the light come through the other window. I see the light come in through the bathroom. And I could actually, for 2 seconds, see this dark veil just lift off the room.
You got some issues.
Yeah, I mean, it is the most surreal thing.
I will say, for your listeners, what do you do in a case like that? That's far beyond a haunted house.
Well, that's demonic. That's not ghost.
That's what I know.
Demonic.
The Catholic Diocese of Pittsburgh really is kind of, I say, cutting edge in going back to the roots of the church organizations and teachings that every diocese is to have a trained exorcist at the disposal of the bishop. They have a trained exorcist. They not only have a trained exorcist, they have a lay person, Adam Bly, who his whole role is to help pastoral priests in the various parishes to understand how to deal with these issues. So the Catholic Diocese in Pittsburgh takes all of this very serious. Also, Father Mike Salvania, who I initially went to years ago at the Passionist Monastery, St. Paul's, on the slopes, 18th Street, on the south side, also is very versed in dealing with, obviously, he's in my book, with the whole area of the demonic. So, folks, if you have issues like this beyond a haunted house, the Catholic Church here in Pittsburgh is, in fact, equipped to provide assistance.
Well, and I'm going to reach out to you if I need it.
Okay.
I keep believing that I repelled it. Like last year, the things that happened in the house, you know, it's weird. I met this woman, and how many, you know, I'm single. It's like, how many women, I told her what happened in the house, and she goes, I'm coming over. And she knew the exorcism rites, the St. Michael prayer, everything. She brought her own holy water, went from room to room. How many women, I've never met a woman who can do that. It's almost like they help you at times. You have, see, when this stuff happens, you have these demonic entities, there's also an angel standing there. They are only allowed to do what God allows them to do. And at some point there, the angel like steps in, now you got to leave. And they don't allow anything unless God allows that to happen. You know, so, you know, I've learned so much over the years.
I can tell you that, you know, I know all the procedures, I know all the rituals, and I certainly at times over the years have gone through that process of protection and blessed the house. Takes several hours. I'm not looking for any kind of cottage industry or really to be involved in this stuff at all. It's dangerous. It shouldn't be a hobby. These groups going out, the ghost hunters.
I agree with you. I've said that about the ghost hunters.
It's tough, dangerous work, and it shouldn't be a hobby. I understand it. I've experienced it. I'm concerned with my family and my house and their protection, but I certainly know what to do.
Yeah. And I'm determined to break the chain because it's not getting my kids. We are unbelievably almost out of time.
Well,
Give us a
real quick. You know, when you said in the name of Jesus Christ, what's his name down in Florida who runs the UFO?
Joe Jordan.
Yeah. That's what they say now in the
repels the abductions. That's why I'm telling you. When you compare the two, what we're going to do the next episode, we're going to talk about my stuff and how it relates to UFOs. We only got a few minutes left. Tell us some of the things that happened. I wear this now. Never used to wear that. I wear that now, but you wore it, and what happened to yours?
I have three of them.
Yeah, but was it St. Benedict?
Yeah, oh, there's
St.
three.
Michael?
One of them, my deceased son found one of these in the desert in Iraq.
Wow.
We don't know how old it was, but it was in the sand in the desert in Iraq. I have that on here,
You know,
too.
I was at West Point 20-something years ago, and I found a little stone with a cross on the one side etched in. I carried it for a while, and I gave it to my son, and he lost it. He lost it.
Wow.
Who knows where that came from? But tell us quickly some of the stuff that happened, and then we got to sum it up. We're almost out of time.
You mean during...
Didn't you have crosses that bent, that bent and blood come out of the walls and stuff?
Yeah, I mean... I kind of hesitate to get into the individual things. When you read the book, it makes much more sense. But yes, at one point in time, I will describe, for those that are familiar with a Catholic priest who blesses a congregation or a room with holy water. You'll have the holy water in a vessel and takes this thing and it sprinkles it on the walls or on the people. Now, we had reached a point in time where I believe the demon felt it had beaten us, it had beaten the church, and ultimately beaten our faith in God. And I believe this was after a year. Father Langwin had said, in a year we'll know if we're making progress. And I believe it was claiming victory. Because what started to occur, this substance didn't seep out of the walls. It was applied to the walls like it would be holy water, mocking the demonic likes to mock and to pervert things that are represented as holy and religious. So instead of water, it was blood. And we're claiming this. Now, was it real blood? No. It certainly looked like blood. And I've had it analyzed. First we analyzed and determined it was nothing natural. It wasn't mold. It wasn't mildew. And then they broke down the components of the fluid, and they were able to say what it was made of. But it made no sense of why these different sulfur and carbohydrates. It's not like, yeah, well, that's cherry soda pop, or that's Mr. Clean or something. No, they were able to say what it was made of. They had no idea how the substance was put together. So that eventually appeared throughout the house. It started on the 3rd floor, then the 2nd floor. The lamp on my nightstand beside my bed, a lampshade. You know, there's the outer shade. For a fabric lampshade, the outer, and then the inner liner. This stuff was not on the lamp on the exterior. It appeared on the interior of the lamp. It would do things all the time to mess with your mind, to say, hey, I'm here. I was here when you were sleeping last night. I took all your pocket change and I placed it on end across your nightstand to let you know I was here when you were sleeping. Things like that. But as I said, we then learned how to put a stick in its eye.
So what is the bottom line message of your book? Because we're basically out of time here. What is the message you want to tell people with your book?
The message is, and you know, going back to our discussion about how people believe and science has all the answers and science is their religion, and belief in God and belief in the devil in some way is some type of, you know, medieval superstition. And we have grown to a level of intelligence that brushes all that aside, again, as superstition. Well, I can tell you that people were just as smart 2,000 years ago as they are today. And they had the ability to reason just like we do today. No one was smart. They had more information. And the conclusion is, folks, God is for real. God exists. The whole thing about Jesus and the cross, death, all happened. The devil is real, and the devil hates it. The devil hates people who believe in God, and it's a war. And whatever we want to think about the Big Bang, whether it was a TV show or whatever, however it happened, God made it happen. It's all true, and you need to examine your own life and how you fit into good or evil and what your story is going to be for eternity.